I'm Brandon Dawson, and this is The Distiller, a podcast about how we find meaningful work and how we find meaning in the work we do. Welcome to the new year. This is the second year of The Distiller, and my first guest for this year is Kim Taylor. Kim is a Cincinnati-based singer-songwriter who's released 4 albums and 2 EPs over the course of her career. She also put out an album as half of the duo Water and Sand with Todd Thibault. And recently, Kim had a bona fide hit in China, a surprise to her, which led to her touring China twice in 2018 and opened doors all around the world that she couldn't have imagined. Over the last couple of years, Kim has also expanded her reach into acting. Most notably, she co-starred with Ned Oldham in the Todd Porterfield film I Used to Be Darker. Kim and I talked just before the end of 2018 inside the beautiful Gothic chapel at Christ Church Cathedral in downtown Cincinnati, the reasons for which Kim will tell us about a little later on. But it is a beautiful space, and I encourage you to visit thedistillerpodcast.com while you listen to this episode to see photos of that space and of our time there. Kim is just about to release her 5th album. It's called Songs of Instruction, and it comes out February 22nd. But the first single, The Hard Way, is available right now to stream on Spotify and other platforms. Stick around at the end of our conversation because I'm going to give you a preview of that song, The Hard Way. Kim is one of my very favorite singer-songwriters in Cincinnati or anywhere else. Her voice is somehow both innocent and world-weary, tentative and powerfully certain. Her songs convey a depth of feeling and experience, but with great simplicity. And it was really great to talk with Kim specifically about both her artistic process and how her work has really become her work. It's a great insight into an intentional approach to creative work and a life that sustains it. So I'm very happy to present, as the first episode of this new year, my conversation with singer-songwriter Kim Taylor on The Distiller. All right. Well, first of all, cheers.
Cheers.
Welcome.
Thank you
for joining me here at Christ Church Cathedral. I usually start off with a specific question, but before we start that, I want to ask you to tell us a little bit about where we are, because in the intros to these, I usually introduce the place, but I feel like you would be better capable of doing that.
So we are at Christ Church Cathedral. We are in the Centennial Chapel, which is the original chapel for this cathedral. So this place is about 200 years old, a little bit over 200 years old. And they just renovated it about a year ago. Okay. So these walls used to be dark brown.
All the stone walls in here?
All the stone walls used to be dark brown, so they were cleaned up. That was one of the biggest changes that happened. There's also a brand new organ that was hand-built and installed. You can actually hand pump that organ, which is pretty cool.
It's incredible.
So I have been connected to this cathedral now for 5 years, and in the last year, I've started hosting concerts in this space. And Justin has actually been doing the sound for it. Musicians love playing in Gothic chapels, right? I mean, I do. And so...
You don't even do you even amplify them?
We do amplify it, yeah. Okay. But yeah, it's just a super vibey place, especially since they have renovated it. Everything is about the sound. So if the floor was newly poured, and everything is geared towards just an impeccable sound. So
right on. Well, for people listening, Terry's taking pictures as we talk, and we'll put some pictures of this beautiful, beautiful place. We haven't done any podcast episodes sitting under stained glass windows and in such a lovely spot. So thanks for welcoming us in. Yeah. So this is your home church?
This is my home cathedral, yes. Okay. Which, for me, I was 12 years out of church, and so coming back to a church was a really big deal. And I still, I'm still like, what?
Yeah.
But the Episcopalians are pretty friggin' cool people. So and
I've seen you've posted some things online and stuff about the cool stuff that's going on here. It seems like a place that's doing really, really great stuff.
It is,
It does seem, for my money, if you're going to be a part of an American Protestant group, the Episcopalians are maybe the one. You might want to
check us out. Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you again for having us in here. So the question that I start off with everybody is, what do you do? This is a podcast about, we say it's about how we find meaningful work and how we find meaning in the work we do. And I understand that work doesn't always mean paying work for people. But tell us a little bit in your own definition about what you do professionally or vocationally.
I would define myself as a songwriter. And I don't know, it's funny, I define myself less as a singer, I guess because I know at some point my voice will probably give away, but I'm hoping my sight won't. I'm hoping and my mind. I'm hoping I'll always be able to write songs or write in general. I'm lucky enough that I do get to make a living at it. I don't take that for granted. I know this is a changing world, and it's only been for maybe 10 years I've been able to make a living at it, and who knows where we'll be 10 years from now. But yeah, that's what I do. I write songs, so.
Cool.
Yeah.
And along with that, you obviously you perform songs, you're a recording artist.
Yeah.
And in the last few years, you've actually started doing some acting as well.
Yeah, and I don't think that's my vocation.
You don't think you're an actor?
Well, I mean, I've had all these opportunities to do it, but I'm still like, what, really? Are you sure?
Well, maybe we'll talk in a minute because I want to talk about how that stuff came up. Tell us a little bit about how you became a songwriter. When did you start writing songs? When did you think you could take it seriously? And when did you begin to think, I might actually be able to make a living from it?
So I started writing songs when I was about 18. And it's funny because I grew up playing music. I played flute in junior high, took a lot of piano lessons. But in junior high, that's where I learned all my theory, was flute and sight reading competitions and all these different things. And then when I hit ninth grade, I didn't want to be a band nerd, and I decided I wanted to be a dancer instead. So I kind of abandoned the band path in high school, but that's when I started singing, and I didn't realize until I was about 18 that songs were written by people. I think I was a late bloomer to a lot of stuff.
They come from somewhere?
That they come from somewhere. And so I didn't even know Joni Mitchell existed till I was probably about 20 years old. It was all Janet Jackson and pop music, Casey Kasem's Top 100 Countdown every
Which wouldn't
weekend.
be surprised to anybody that's listened to your latest musical forays.
Yeah.
It's dance pop.
Right, it's dance
Straight
pop.
ahead
I wish.
Pop.
Maybe I'm saving that record for when I'm 70. So I started writing songs when I was about 18 and started learning guitar when I was about 20. Started playing. This was down in Florida. I was born and raised in Florida, so I was still in Florida at the time. Started playing open mics in Orlando, Florida, actually. And that was where I started kind of getting obsessed with doing this thing. And that evolved into me eventually finding my way up to Cincinnati when I was about 23. And in Cincinnati's really been the place that I think embedded it in my soul, really. I started playing open mics on a regular basis in Cincinnati for several years.
You came up to Cincinnati to play music?
No, I came up to go to school, and I mean, honestly, I came up because I needed to get out of Florida. And I had a couple of friends in Cincinnati. I didn't know where else to go.
Okay.
I landed here. I found a place to live right away, in a church, actually. And I started playing open mics on the local scene, started playing on a regular basis, started being invited to do, to sort of have regular guest spots. And then, and honestly, City Beat kind of embraced me from the beginning. They started writing reviews about me. I put out a record in 2002 called So Black, So Bright. And City Beat gave me lots of New Artist of the Year and lots of praise for it. And I started doing some touring with local band Over the Rhine. And that was really just, it's funny because even then I never thought, I can make a living at this. I just did it because I loved it. I never thought I can profit off of this.
Right.
That really didn't hit me for a really long time. So anyway.
And for a while, and I don't know all the timing, but for a while you owned a coffee shop.
I did,
up in Pleasant Ridge.
Yeah, and that was really how I made a living, because any music money was being pumped back into, music. So at that time, once I got the coffee shop, I mean, there's a lot that happened in that space, but I ended up having management and an agency and all these different things. And so I would work the coffee shop, and then I would come home, and I would then I would go on tour for a couple of weeks, and I'd have to come home and work the coffee shop. And I did that for like almost 9 years.
Yeah.
And had a lot of amazing experiences, put out many records during that time, but it was exhausting, and I got to a place where I couldn't do both. I couldn't do both, and I had to choose. They both were so consuming, not just physically, but like emotionally and mentally. And I was starting to get to a place where I was making a living musically, and so I could go, okay, I got to choose.
Maybe
now.
I don't have to.
Maybe I don't have to do both.
Do this.
Yeah.
So describe a little bit, because this is the kind of the dirt that I like to get into in the podcast is like, what do I not know when I talk to somebody we talked to a guy who's a life flight air rescue nurse. It's like, what is the minutia of your day? How did that happen? Where did you start out? And so I feel like everybody's got exposure to songwriters and to music and has some knowledge of folk music and pop and stuff like that. But the process of deciding to go down that path and actually how you make all of those decisions is interesting to me. So at what point did you said that City Beat embraced you, Best New Artist Awards in the Cincinnati Entertainment Awards. And then at what point, what are the milestones that you kind of go through? You put out that first record. Who first took you out on the road? What were the first experiences that you had where you felt like, oh, this is a real thing. This isn't me playing coffee shops anymore?
The very first experience I had with getting a taste of like what it was like to open for another artist was actually prior to me moving to Cincinnati. I did a little tiny tour that stopped in Cincinnati. And I opened for this gal named Sarah Mason. And she lived in Michigan, and she was a folk artist. She was just starting to break out herself. And that was like my first real exposure of exposure and experience of seeing what this world was like. When I moved to Cincinnati, I was definitely embraced by Over the Rhine, Karen and Linford of Over the Rhine, and they really, I mean, for years I was like their go-to opener, and it was just sort of a priceless experience for me. Not only to have to play constantly before this silent, reverent, actually listening crowd, but having to make sure my chops were good and even vocally. I am a totally different singer from Karen, but it was, night after night of having to sort of be in that situation was really good for me. And then eventually, like I said, I ended up getting a manager that connected me with an agency and a lot of different moving parts. And I started playing up actually at this club called The Living Room in New York City on a regular basis. It's no longer, unfortunately, there anymore.
But a legendary place.
But it's a legendary place. It's where
music.
like Nora Jones was launched out of there. And the owner and her husband, who owned a really famous studio at the time, which no longer exists as well, called The Magic Shop, really embraced me. They kind of saw me as being like the next Nora Jones. And so I was going up there on a monthly basis and playing and meeting industry people and just constantly just trying to make it happen. But again, I don't know. I wasn't really thinking a lot about, can I make a living? I guess I was just thinking about, I was so obsessed with writing songs and performing and the whole process and learning to live this life. And I didn't know what else to do. There was a part of that too. And the deeper I got, the more I was like, well, now I really have no valid skills in any other field, I don't know how to do anything. The time has passed, exactly. That, yeah, for sure. So I just kind of and except coffee, I can make coffee, Yeah. I was good at doing that.
How did the process of getting a manager, the process of getting an agent, how does that happen for somebody that doesn't know? Who approached you?
I don't know. I mean, people ask me that a lot. I just actually had a conversation with that. about that with someone a couple weeks ago, and it's certainly part luck. I happened to get my manager back when Midpoint Music Festival was actually more like a South by Southwest situation.
Yeah,
where
it's a legendary Cincinnati festival for people that aren't from here for years and years. It still happens, but it's a different thing now. But it used to be every club in sort of downtown and over the Rhine over 3 nights, 500, 700 bands in these little tiny venues. It was really great.
Yeah, it was really geared towards the local scene, and it was really geared towards helping people like connect and network, and it was more like South by Southwest was set up. And so the second year I played it, my manager stopped in at my gig, and I had a full house for my set, and he handed me his business card. I was like, this is weird. I don't want a manager. But 6 months later, I ended up calling him in Boston, and I've been with him for 13 years,
wow.
and he's opened a lot of doors for me, made a lot of connections, and it's just, I don't know, it's sort of spiraled. But I think the other part of that is I've said yes to a lot, even stuff I didn't want to do. Just yes, I need to do this. Yes, exposure. And when I say I didn't want to do it, not because necessarily it was immoral, but more like I was exhausted. I just didn't want to do this anymore. Really having second guesses about this life, and but I just kept saying yes, and I can't stop now. What else am I gonna do?
Yeah.
And I don't know. That's just. It seems like every 6 months there's something else that pops up that I go, what? I'm doing what now?
And now movies, and now China.
Yeah, exactly. And so now it's made me go, okay, when I'm 70, I am going to make a pop disco record. It's going to happen,
Fantastic. Well, maybe full disclosure, Kim and I first met when I was tour managing over the Rhine, and 2005, I think 2006, you opened about a year worth of shows for them. And so we were out on the road together for a long time. And my memories of that are specifically, there was a guy that you and I both knew and loved, who's no longer with us, Dave Foreman, who was mixing front of house for Over the Rhine at the time. And Dave and I used to marvel. We used to just sit and listen to your songs, and we'd go out, we'd be, out for a weekend or out for a week or whatever, and we'd all be shacked up in a hotel somewhere. And then Kim would come out of her hotel room the next morning with a new song.
I thought you were going to say drunk. No, I was like, no.
Drunk as a lord. The opposite. You would go bury yourself in the hotel room, and I know that you would call Dan and Griffin, and then it seemed like you just basically pulled out the notebook, and you would just come out. I think I Feel Like a Fading Light, your second full-length album, was largely maybe written that year on the road. And so songs like I Feel Like a Fading Light, I remember, I think I was there the first time you ever played that live, and just being like, jaw on the floor. Where did that come from at those tunes? And Dave and I both exactly the same way.
I feel like a fading light. Some days they don't come so easy. Truth is the strongest word. Truth is like the smallest bird. I learned that some things you let fly. Why don't we just brave the storm? Why do we feel low so low?
That process of writing those songs, has that changed for you over the years in terms of how you do that?
Not really. I mean, I do think I have less time. Well, that's not true. I would say I don't think I have less time. I think during that time, I think something that when I look back at that, especially when I think about I was touring like that, and I was also having to come home and run a coffee shop, and my son was growing up. He was like, I think it was the fact that I didn't have a lot of time to myself that I felt so desperate to write the songs. I needed to get them out. And I was very, someone asked me the other day about this. I'm very faithful to capturing the ideas. I don't Because I know that if I don't, I will forget them.
Yeah.
And so I'm very dedicated and have been for a really long time to any melodies, any fragments of words. I don't care. I have no attachment to them in the beginning. I can feel them bubbling up, and I have to sit down and record them. And then later I'll go back and listen and see if there's something there. But used to do it on an analog tape. Now I do it on my phone. It's so much easier on my phone.
Yeah.
But I've just always been faithful to that. It's like the only thing sometimes I feel like it's the only thing I have, you know? I don't know, I think that's made all the difference. So I'm still doing that, you know? Now it's like but now sometimes I'm waiting, going, it's so quiet in my brain. Come on.
Where's the next one?
Where's the next one?
So I remember hearing something about Lucinda Williams talking about writing songs that basically for her, it was like going to work, you know, sit down at the kitchen table, pull out the notebook. It was work, and she was going to put in the time. Is that the way that you work, or is it more you wait until something bubbles and you capture it?
It's both. It's not either or. I wait till things. I feel like I'm always working because I feel like I'm always having to stay vigilant. You know, someone once described the process as you're standing in the middle of a field, and all of a sudden you hear from the distance the oncoming train, and then the train gets closer and closer and closer, and then it hits you, and then it leaves. And I'm just in that field, and I've got my record, and I'm waiting for that oncoming train. So I'm always vigilant, and I am the kind of person, if at 1 a.m. I have to pee, but also I have a melody, I will record the melody. Right. I do it on planes. I'm always... but at the same time, I also know there's a time where I need to sit down and start going through everything, which is so painful, but just going through it and figuring out what's going to work. And that's when I know I'm starting to write a new record. Okay. Is when I start feeling that I've collected enough, you know, and I can feel that I've got a lot here that I can start sifting through and finishing songs, and what are the themes happening, what has been going on in my heart for, 3 or 4 years now. So. Yeah.
So that's the other part of it for what you do. You don't get to just write the songs because otherwise nobody hears them. You have to make a record.
Yeah, I feel compelled to, and I know some people don't, and I've always felt compelled to have other people hear it and not just keep it to myself, because I know some people just make art and it's just for them, and that's cool, and that's what they need to do, and I respect that, and I honestly, I kind of admire that, because they don't have the pressure to need to be loved and stroked, I don't know what that is. But I definitely have a need to let people hear it and try to connect with people and go, okay, I made this thing, what do you think about it now?
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about that, because you are a very private person. You're not a huge, that's why we're joking around, if you haven't heard Kim's music, about her making a dance record, because the music that you do make is kind of on the other end of the spectrum. It's intimate, quiet, really deep, beautiful music. And I wondered that about you. Like it seems to me like the parts, everything after the writing of the song is potentially something that is a challenge to your personality. Like getting it out there, performing, making a record, having to go through the process of publicizing a record, having to do this stuff to get it out there. Is that true? I mean, is there any part of you that really digs that, or is all of that sort of the necessary evil that it takes to make a living writing your songs?
I really love performing. So I wouldn't include performing in that category. I definitely love, because it's so different from the recording process. It's so different from the writing process. And I definitely feel a connection with a good performance. Even with a bad performance, there's something that it does to me. There's a humbling that happens when I don't get it right. And the older I get, the more I embrace being in that place of like uncertainty with performance.
If you would, just take a second and describe that for somebody that's not a performer. What does not getting it right mean?
Can I swear on this thing?
Yes.
I am totally okay with fucking up. Like, in fact, and maybe it's just because I know what it feels like to have like a really wonderful, like, oh, Kim, you nailed that one. That felt really great. And sometimes when I feel like I'm uncertain, then it just sometimes a magic can happen, and I love that line. But what was your question again? Like the performance aspect?
Because people see an
like?
artist, and sometimes they know that they have an on night or an off night. But for you, is it oh, I forgot a lyric, or I missed a chord, or is it just I didn't connect, or is it?
I would say, I think. Okay, so that's actually a really interesting question, because I don't know, I've always really loved I don't know why I've always loved performance. It's funny, like when I was a kid, I was sort of known as being sort of a little bit of a showman. Like we had lights around my swimming pool, and they were colored lights. My dad was an electrician, and he had all these, like, we always had the best technology. We had a tiny little house with the best. We had can lights before they were even a thing. And my dad had installed these, like, spotlights, and I would go out there and do my little dance routine in front of people. So I always liked getting a reaction from people. Okay. So I think I like getting a reaction from people. But I went through this stage 2 years ago, actually after I made these films, where I started suffering from severe stage fright.
Really?
And I had never experienced that in my life. And what would happen is I would get on stage and my legs would start shaking.
Wow.
And they would shake for the first 2 songs, and then I'd be okay. But it was the weirdest thing.
You just had to power through it.
Yeah, and it was really interesting for me to experience that, because mostly I would just get up on stage and do it and not think twice about it. Be a little nervous for a minute, but then I'd get over it.
A healthy nervous.
Yeah, like a healthy nervous. But so.
Is that still, you said it happened?
No, I worked through it. It was the weirdest thing, though. And I was actually really terrified that it was like, oh my God, this is like a new stage of my life. I'm super, cognizant of everybody looking at my every move. But it was just a phase I went through. So.
Do you have any idea why it started after the films?
I have a feeling that it was because making a film is so different from performing for a live audience.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize, especially when you're working with a crew of like 40 people, and, when you choke, everything has to be reset.
Yeah. Everybody back
and
to
it's
one.
a big deal for 40 people in the room. Whereas when I'm a live performer and it's just me, if I choke, it's funny and I can start over again. And and it's just different. I felt like there was a lot more pressure. And so, it's just harder.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the movies, because I don't even know how that whole thing came about.
Yeah.
So you were in a movie, it was released in 2006 called I Used to Be Darker.
No, it was released in 2013. Yeah,
right?
just
Getting
a
my
few years
dates
ago.
wrong.
Yeah.
How did that come about? Was that the first time you'd ever done that?
It was the first time I'd ever been in a film, although a local friend of mine who does some film work, when she found out I was going to be in this film, she literally, I'm not joking, she forced me to audition for another film that was coming to Cincinnati, and I was like, I'm not going to do this. And I did it, and I got the role. Which was good ultimately, because then I got this experience of being on a professional film set and having this minor role. And I had, lines and everything, but learning the language before I actually did this other film in Baltimore.
Yep, the language of production.
The language of production, and I had no idea. I didn't know that experience, what it would be like to actually have rolling and the camera's on you and everybody's staring at you and be like, so the short story, I won't give you the long story, is that I met this girl in a college experience I had in my 20s, and we dated the same guy briefly, not at the same time, different times. We were never really friends, but she was always known as the writer, and I was always known as the songwriter, the musical one in our school. And anyway, she moved away. She went to Iowa Writers Workshop, became like a really amazing writer. And then she started dating this up-and-coming director, Matthew Porterfield, out of Baltimore. And she emailed me one day out of the blue in like 2010 and was like, I've co-written the script. I want you to be in it. I've sort of built loosely this film off of you. And I was like, wow. Shut up. And she was like, no, will you do it? And I said to her, I was like, no, probably not. I won't do it. I didn't hear from her for a year. She emailed me again. She was like, no, I'm serious. It's happening. Will you do this? And I was like, I don't know. And so then her then boyfriend, director, Matt, came to a show of mine in, it's actually a show I was opening for Over the Rhine in Baltimore. Mm-hmm. And that was my audition. And that's how it started. And so then, we did the film. And then we did the film, and a year later got into Sundance, and then that whole thing spiraled.
Right.
So, yeah.
Crazy. Mm-hmm. Did you enjoy it?
I did enjoy it, but it was one of the hardest things I'd ever done.
Why?
Because it required a level of vulnerability that I thought I had mastered as a songwriter.
Okay.
And as a performer, as a live songwriting and, singer-songwriter. Mm-hmm. I thought I had really mastered. I think you really, when you are doing performance, and then you have to spend time with fans, and especially because I am an introvert, I can be extroverted at times, but I am deeply an introvert. I felt like I really knew what that rhythm was going to be like, and it's not like that at all. And it really feels like having a video camera in your face, practically embedded in the pores of your skin, is just a bizarro experience. And having to accept what you look like, how you sound like, every move you make. I was actually thinking recently with Lady Gaga in A Star Is Born. Yeah. It's so different seeing her in this raw picture, because we just get this image of her that's usually, just decked out in something head to toe, or, we have this vision of her, and she just looks like a normal person. Yeah. And that's what I think people are freaking out about with her. And so it's like, I don't know.
She's such a human being.
Yeah, she's such a human being, and there's talk about her. You get to see this deep vulnerability with her that people want to see, but at the same time, then it opens you up wide for all these other, issues, criticisms, or whatever. And I was just sort of terrified of that process. So I think I've always said that with songwriting, music is a way for me to get over the fact that I probably can never be a poet, because I think poetry is like the highest form, in my opinion. When you can get all the rhyme and the music in just the words, that's the best. And I feel like I hide behind my voice and I hide behind the guitar. Well, with acting, I felt like I was hiding behind the guitar and hiding again, like it was just this totally different.
Yeah, another layer. Peeled back.
Peeled back. Exactly.
What's the feedback been? I mean, it's a different sort of feedback because it's delayed. It's not the immediate gratification, or even not gratification criticism of being in front of an audience.
Right.
But what has it been, and how has that hit you as somebody who gets a lot of feedback, but now having to sort of accept that feedback in a completely different way?
So I ended up doing 2 more projects after that. One was I had this incredible experience to get to be in a big SAG production, get cast in. It was this Stephen Sondheim, the Nick series, which was like a really big deal. And so that led to me getting to be in that kind of production, which was insane. And then I had 300 people staring at my every move. And I think that was one of the things that gave me the shakes for a while.
Right. Just the scale of the
scale of it, and the scale of if you screwed up, then you had 300 people that had to start over again, and then you had this history. Well, you can just feel
the dollars.
Oh, yeah.
Clicking off.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
Everybody's salaries. And if you make the mistake, there's thousands and thousands of dollars.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that was really intimidating. But then I ended up doing another film called Ken the Movie with Ken Stringfellow of the Posies, which has been a great experience as well. So I don't know. I think the feedback is like, people say that I'm natural at acting, which is great to hear. I also know that that's a whole craft. It's a whole world. I'm not nearly as passionate about that world. I think I'm doing it because for me to say no, it's like, why wouldn't you do it, Kim? Just do it and see what happens.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it seems like pretty decent feedback along the way to be told that you're a natural about it.
Yeah, so we'll just see.
What last thing about that, like what are the transferable skills between the music and the songwriting?
Well,
and
I think one of the most incredible things I've been able to witness is the work ethic of the film industry. I mean, so I actually, now that I forgot about it, I ended up doing 3 films after it, 2 indie projects that had a huge crew. One was the Baltimore project with Matt, that worked with a lot of kids out of Johns Hopkins and the art school there. And then I did another project that worked with the film crew and a lot of kids out of Ohio University in their film school. And I don't know, just being up, for 10 hours around the clock, from like 8 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning with a crew of hardworking kids that are all committed to this one moment by moment by moment,
right.
was really inspiring and really felt good to sort of, those are my people too, being any being in sort of those scenes are all my people. So, and also I think I've been fortunate to be around a couple of different cinematographers and directors that are, especially recently, I'm hanging out with a German director, Claudia Rorarius, who's worked on the Ken film. And she's just a really inspiring person. Women in the arts, women filmmakers, cinematographers, and watching them and their dedication to their craft. I bring that to my craft and the seriousness that they take each moment, everything. She spends freaking 45 minutes trying to get the right shot and,
right.
Set up for one moment, it's like, it's a lot of dedication, so.
So what have you brought back to the music from that?
The same kind of dedication, that it's important, it's worth it, it's valuable, and it takes a long time, and a lot of commitment, and the process is long and slow, but it's worth it, so.
So thinking back to 2005, 2006, and what I was talking about when we were on the road there, my conception of who you were as an artist then and who you are now, is sort of like, then you were doing this brilliant thing, but it seemed like you were even at that point, finding your feet, finding your confidence. I remember really enjoying, as a musician myself, like enjoying watching you try on different ways to perform different songs, different instrumentation, different overall tenor to the thing, more intimacy, more aggressiveness. As a performer and as a whole package singer-songwriter, now you are 5 albums and 2 EPs later and a record to come out, well, that'll be out when this airs or very soon after. Do you think you're a different artist sort of at the core? Has it made you see yourself differently there or approach it differently?
I don't think I'm a different artist. I definitely feel all the stages, but I think I'm a lot more centered, and I have accepted my limitations. I think I know now what I'm good at, and I don't feel bad about what I'm not good at or what aren't my strengths. Can you describe that? Like maybe what you thought 10 years ago you wanted to be, or who you thought you were that you're not now? I probably, I have my range. I have a much deeper, lower range. I am not. It was funny. I actually did a session for Epic Records years ago in New York City, and I was actually another long story, but had been brought in to we got plenty of time. Be a songwriter for a new Avril Lavigne record, right? And so the way these work out is all these like basically there's a call put out into the world for new songs for a huge artist record, and so they basically just block out huge sections of major cities and have songwriters come in and just try to write songs, and then they own the song that you did, which kind of sucks. But anyway, I had gone in and I had co-written the song with this dude, and we went into the studio and recorded it. And after the session, and while we were recording it, there's one section of the song that you just need to belt it. It just requires a pink level of belting, and I'm not that kind of singer. And I remember the engineer being like, "Come on, just belt it," and I'm like, "I can't." Like my vocal range is going to break, and that's where I'm at. Yeah. And I remember him just getting really quiet. And I remember after the session me feeling kind of bad because I had this kind of quieter version of the song, and I could hear how it would be belting out, how she'd belt it out in my head, but I couldn't personally do that. And I've come to accept that, I'm a much quieter. I have my moments where I can be loud and aggressive, but it's a lower tone, and I'm also okay with the fact that I have limitations to my voice. And that was, I think about my own journey as a singer. I have friends from my high school years that go, "You do what?" Because they have no idea.
Yeah.
And then when I sing, they're like, "Well, you sound nothing like you did in high school." Because I had a really timid, quiet voice. So that's an example. I think it's really important to find what you're good at and then to just be really fucking good at it. Because then that's what people, embrace and know you for. And I think I'm starting to figure that out. And I don't think people expect me to belt it out like Aretha or whatever, because that's just not what I do, and it's not what I can't do that. I'm not Aretha Franklin,
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that, and I don't think I was 10 years ago,
Right.
I'm also, when it comes to the things I'm interested in writing about, I like to write about life very simply, in simple terms. I'm actually okay with cliche because I think it's all about how you represent the cliche again, how you serve it back up. So I'm interested in how to repackage simplicity in a way that feels deep and meaningful. Like
and
when
see it through a new facet or a
exactly,
nuance.
exactly, yeah. So, yeah.
What about China? Tell us about China.
Oh my God. China is still something I am trying to wrap my brain around, honestly.
People probably don't know what I'm referencing, so start from the beginning.
So the beginning is that in 2017, in the fall of 2017, I received an email from a company called NetEase, from the vice president of a company called NetEase, and it was a big, long, lengthy email about the company and yada, yada, yada. And I deleted it, let's just say. Because I was like, email from China,
was it asking
the last
for something?
thing. I didn't really know. I was like, I read half of it and I was like, what is this? Come on. My songs, my stuff was...
We will wire you $1.4 million.
Yeah, it was like, exactly. It was like an offer. I was like, yeah, whatever. So I deleted it and didn't think twice about it. And 2 months later, I received another email from the same guy, Matthew. And that was the same thing, but more information and an offer. And so I thought, I was like, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to forward it to my management, my lawyer. So I did, and I started doing some research and found out that a song of mine had exploded in China. And there are a couple of major companies in China that are, in a nutshell, cleaning up the system, cleaning up the way that Chinese people connect with music. And it's, everything's been pirated for the most part. And that's not really the case anymore. I guess it's the younger generation they love apps, and they love apps that give an accessibility to music. So interestingly enough, apps like Apple Music and Spotify don't have much of a place in that market. They exist, but they're very, very tiny, like 1% of the market. So there's a couple other more Chinese-centered companies that dominate the market. And so then I ended up signing a deal with this company that's sort of like a publishing deal. So they've been granted exclusivity to my catalog for a certain amount of time, and so that then led to me getting tons of offers from agencies. And again, I still had, I had no picture. I really had no idea what this was. I was just like, oh, this is cool. This is great.
Fine,
this is
somebody's
nice.
interested
Whatever.
in my
this
music.
Is cool, yeah.
Yeah.
So then we started getting lots of offers from touring agencies to represent me. And so eventually, after about 4 or 5 months of weeding through offers, we started working with this agency called Modern Sky. They have offices all over the world. They also have an office in New York City, which made us feel like, okay, you've got an office in New York City.
Maybe you're legit.
Yeah, but also just like there's a language barrier, and we wanted to make sure we knew what we were signing,
right.
we were doing. So fast forward to August, I did my first tour over there. I played 2 major festivals for thousands of people.
Yeah. I've seen these pictures. These are massive festival crowds.
Festival crowds. And then I did another one in October. I did one festival in October, and then I did a streaming live show on NetEase's account. So anyway, yeah, it's crazy.
And you had what sounds like a legitimate hit over there. I mean,
yeah, it was like a legitimate hit. And I'll just tell you this story. So the last time I was over there in October, we flew into a city called Kunming, which is in Western China, and then we flew I had this streaming session in Beijing, and when we checked into the hotel in Beijing, this really beautiful little super hipster kind of hotel, when I walked into my room, opened the door, everything was automated, like the lights came on, and it was very cool. And anyway, there's a record player, or not a record player, but like a stereo, and within 30 seconds, my song started playing. And I was like, oh, come on, this is whatever. I figured my touring I figured that my manager over there had done this to me, or whatever, as a gag or whatever. Yeah. So I go downstairs to the lobby and meet up with my band, and my band was like, we walked into our room and your song was playing on the radio. And I was like, that's weird, that happened to me too. And I asked my agent, she was like, no, that's just how it is. Everybody just knows your stuff, Kim. And I was like, what?
That's insane.
So it had not been planned by the hotel, by anyone. I just walked in, and that's the song that they have playing in all of the radios when you walk into these rooms in this hotel in Beijing.
That's crazy.
Randomly, yeah. So wow. I was like, okay.
Like an anchored to a bottomless sea. I am floating freely in my heavens, held in by your heart's gravity, all because of love, all because of love. Even though sometimes you don't know who I am, I am you. Everything you do, anything you say, you want me to be. You and me, we're charms on a chain, linked eternally, one we can't undo. And I am you.
So as a singer-songwriter who's been working to get your name out, now all of a sudden you have a hit in Asia.
Yeah.
There's got to be, and I'm like, I don't want to, we're in the Midwest and people don't talk about money, but that's got to be impactful. That's got to actually be both a career validation, and it's got to be a meaningful expansion to this thing that you've been working on for years. Yeah,
it is. And so I feel like, it's funny because there was definitely a part of me when I was there. Both times were such great experiences. I've had so much experience touring and playing, and some incredible, festivals here in the United States, and getting to tour with lots of really amazing artists. So it wasn't like I was showing up completely,
right,
unsure of what was going on. But it was absolutely a validation. I mean, I cried, I cried a lot, and then. The agency that reps me over there had hired a document, like a film crew, to document my first experience in China. And so in August, when I landed in Beijing, there was a film crew pretty much by my side for 3 days. And then they made this awesome little like introduction of my first time to Beijing. And they had hooked me up with all these like really amazing experiences. And when I first saw the documentary, I just bawled like a baby because I thought, number one, how crazy is it for this film crew out of China to have spent 3 days with me, following me, getting my story, listening to my music. And they knew my music already, but documenting my every move. And then they make this like 3-minute documentary that basically just summed up 15 years of my life perfectly. Like they got me better than anyone. And that's why I cried, because I just went, oh my God. They even like told the story I tell the story of how I wrote Days Like This and how like that was a turning point for me. And like they just nailed it. And I was like, that's incredible to me. Like it was such a gift.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I can die now. Not that I want to die. I'm not ready to die. But it was definitely like, oh, wow, okay, all right.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah, it was really beautiful.
Cool. Let's talk about the new record just a little bit.
Okay.
You recorded it here in Cincinnati. This is going to turn from a work interview now just into the standard radio.
Yeah,
Tell us about your new music interview.
I'm excited to talk about the new music.
Yeah, well, tell me about it. It's there's kind of been a break between your last record and this one. When did you were talking about that you're ready to make a record when you have this group of songs. Was that the case for this one?
Yeah, so the last record I put out was Love's the Dog. I had made it in 2011 and 2012, put it out in 2013. And have had a lot of things happen between now and then. And just a lot of different experiences. In the last year, I've had a lot of difficult experiences. I already have started. I've actually not been writing too much for about a year, and in the last 2 or 3 months, I've started writing again. So I know I'm already working on the next record after this one.
Right, because all this stuff's
I've
going on.
I've had a bunch of different experiences this year. But for Songs of Instruction, part of that I think has emerged from reconnecting with a religious institution for number one, and owning it in a way that I never have. I had left my Christian faith, which was I'd grown up in a Baptist church. I had done a couple years of Bible college. I had left the whole thing. And one of the main reasons why I'd left the whole thing was because there was no place for my gay friends. And I was very much like, if my gay friends can't have a place to worship, then I don't have a place to worship. Yep. So, and I genuinely thought for about 10 to 12 years that there was no place for me in religion. And that I didn't know what I believed. I certainly didn't believe anything that I grew up with. I certainly didn't believe in biblical literacy and a lot of stuff. And I was pretty bitter and angry. I only had, if you were a Christian, I was very judgy of you. I was only friends with atheists. And long story short, again, we ended up coming back to a church, and we came here partly because we knew the Episcopal Church's stance on gay people and women. It's just been kind of interesting because I feel like I've reconnected with something that had been royally hijacked. So on the one hand, it's funny, I have actually never read the Bible. I was an English lit major. I'd actually never read the Bible from beginning to end, knew the major stories. Sure. It's so infused. I teach short stories to high schoolers. It's so infused in every short story I teach my kids, and I keep realizing how all these metaphors and these stories are just going over their head. They just don't get so much of it, and it's because they just don't get. There's such a illiteracy when it comes to the biblical text. Right. So I'm like, but wait a second, Kim, have you read the Bible from beginning to end? So it's so funny. I'm reading all these stories again, and with a completely different perspective, and my mind is just being blown away. It's just funny because I'm getting to go, oh, David, you're so fucked up. You know that?
What a cad.
It's just, you're just such a weirdo.
Yeah.
I can't believe you did that. Like I never had the interaction with stories.
Was it the distance? You were just able to come to it completely free of...
Well, that and just, the Episcopal Church and so many other forms of faith, have a very different connection to the Bible. And I grew up with a literalist. Every word is literally true.
Right.
And if you don't understand it, then it's because, Kim, God knows better than you do. And just let it go.
Don't even try.
Don't even try.
Yeah.
And that's just not how I was.
Right.
So, it's just a different experience. And so it's pretty cool. But Songs of Instruction, I think, is partly stemmed from that. It's partly me reflecting on the kind of religious upbringing I had and rejecting it. There's a song on there called Pearly Gates that's all about the process. I grew up with this concept that, being a Christian was all about going to heaven and, who was in and who was out. And once you got there, Kim, especially growing up Baptist, I'm probably going to offend all of my Baptist friends, I'm sorry. But I definitely grew up being told, like, heaven's going to be so great. We're all going to have our own mansion and the streets are going to be made of pure gold and it's just going to be wonderful. And, that's a really fucking lonely concept of heaven. And so with my song Pearly Gates, it's all about, I don't even want that.
Yeah.
Like I want to rip down these concepts of being exclusive and living in a mansion by myself and streets of gold. Who cares about that?
Right.
Really?
Who actually wants that?
Who actually wants that?
Yeah.
Like that sounds, I'd slip on that and like break my hip or something, So yeah, there's a lot of that on the record, and then it ends with me doing a song, "Make Me a Channel of Your Peace," which I was inspired by Sinead O'Connor's version of it from the '80s, and that was sort of what inspired me to do my own version. There haven't been a lot of versions out there, and so I thought this would be a good song to end with. So anyway, yeah.
Cool. And you made the record at Ultra Suede here in Cincinnati with Justin, who mixes the podcast.
Yeah, I wanted to do a record here, and I've never done a full length here. That's not true. My very first full length, So Black, So Bright, was made here in Cincinnati, in Norwood, in a makeshift studio, and I had not done a full length since that time. So that's why the cover of my record looks the way it does. It's kind of a hearkening to the cover of my So Black, So Bright record. So everything's black and white. And although I don't believe in black and white, I just want to say that out loud. I believe in nuance.
There's a lot of grayscale in there, yeah.
But yeah, it's a little hearkening to that. And so we made it at Ultra Suede before it moved, and we also made it at a little Episcopal church called St. Luke's that doesn't operate as a church anymore, but it actually operates as a recording spot for musicians, and it's just this cute little old church, yeah.
Where is that?
So it's Sailors Park, so it's over on the west side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, people that have heard the whole record, the record comes out February 22nd. I'm not entirely sure when this will air, but probably right before that. And the first single, The Hard Way, is already out, and you can hear it everywhere, which is just absolutely lovely. I mean,
thank you.
Yeah, like all of your records have been great. They all convey who you are, but there's something about this one that just does feel like you're sitting together.
Yeah.
Listening to you play the songs. It's really intimately recorded. It's really, really, really beautiful, and just feels absolutely like you.
Cool. That's good to hear.
I've really enjoyed it.
Cool.
Thus far.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, Kim, thank you. You spend.
Are we done here?
I think we're probably done here. I could talk to you forever about all this, but you've been really generous with your time, so we can wrap it up. But thank you so much for bringing us into this beautiful place and for talking with us for a little while. And we'll put links on the website to all of the good stuff that we've talked about, and people can go see your album release. When is the album release concert?
That's January 12th.
Okay, we'll make sure this episode comes out before that.
Okay, excellent. In this space, yes, it's going to be awesome.
Fantastic. And go to the distillerpodcast.com for links to all of that. Kim, thank you.
Thank you so much.
We mentioned that Kim's new album, Songs of Instruction, is just about to come out. It releases on February 22nd, but the first single, The Hard Way, is available to stream right now on Spotify and other platforms. We also mentioned the album release concert. That is January 12th at Christ Church Cathedral. Well, as I record this, the show is sold out, so if you don't already have a ticket, you're going to have to wait for the next time. But she'll have more shows this year and will hopefully be bringing her music to your city soon, wherever you are. In the meantime, here is a sample, as promised, of that first single. This is The Hard Way by Kim Taylor.
And is that the way you feel? Like you lost all your hope? Like you've been burned away, nothing but ashes? And have I described you? Maybe exposed you? And is that all you got? Barely can raise your head. Oh, after all these years, I hardly recognize you. Once you were a fighter, prized for all your strength, but now you've gone and given up. And I have no words to say, no wise advice to give. Sometimes it's difficult, sometimes you're cynical. What I can offer you is I'll gladly sit right here, and we'll take it day by day. We'll learn the hard way.
That is the new single, The Hard Way, from our guest Kim Taylor, off the new album Songs of Instruction. That's available everywhere February 22nd, but you can stream The Hard Way wherever you listen to music right now. For more information, including links to Kim's website, as well as to information about the film I Used to Be Darker, and much more on all of Kim's great work, visit our website, thedistillerpodcast.com. This episode of The Distiller was recorded live at Christ Church Cathedral at 318 East 4th Street in Cincinnati, Ohio, a beautiful space, and we're very appreciative of Kim for bringing us in, and of the folks at Christ Church Cathedral for letting us set up and settle into such a beautiful, reverent space. Again, you can see photos of Christ Church Cathedral and our time with Kim on our website at thedistillerpodcast.com. And of course, very sincere thanks to singer-songwriter Kim Taylor for her willingness to delve into her craft and her approach with us. Thank you, Kim. The Distiller is produced, recorded, and hosted by me, Brandon Dawson. Our show is mixed and edited by Justin Golden. Photography for this episode by Terry Heist. Our logo was designed by Scott Ryan, and our videos are by Mike Helm of Minute Moments Pictures. You can find The Distiller wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can listen and download every episode of The Distiller and find information including links, photos of the guests, and a map of all of our show locations at thedistillerpodcast.com. If you like what we're doing, please spread the word. Follow and share our posts on Facebook and Instagram. And the best way you can help us is to rate and review The Distiller wherever you listen. That helps us show up for listeners looking for their next podcast addiction. You can email us at mail@thedistillerpodcast.com to tell us who you think should be on The Distiller to talk about their search for meaningful work, or where you think we should record the next show. So please drop us a line, whether by email, on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. We always love to hear from you. Until next time, I'm Brandon Dawson. Thanks for listening to The Distiller. Bye-bye.